Welcome back to College Football Addiction. Big one coming up for Alabama against the number one team in the country, undefeated Indiana. Drew, hopefully you had a good Christmas, man. Happy New Year to you, and it's about time for some football.
Yeah, it is. It seems like 3 months ago that Alabama played Oklahoma in Norman. It feels like it anyway, but they're going to be taking the field on Thursday at 3 in Pasadena in the granddaddy of them all, the Rose Bowl. And they're playing Indiana, number one Indiana, and it's not a basketball game. This is a 1976, and Alabama's not playing the undefeated Indiana Hoosiers of Bob Knight, who they almost beat that year. So we'll see how they fare on the gridiron. Kurt Signetti is the story of the year and really the last 2 years of what
Yeah.
he's done in Bloomington. And I understand it's a new world. It's NIL. It's the transfer portal. But nobody in their right mind when Coach Signetti took that job after leaving James Madison thought he would do what he's doing. And don't get me wrong, their history is not great, but they've had pockets of success under Bill Mallory. When I was growing up, they were solid. They had Anthony Thompson that almost won the Heisman, and they were a 7-8 win program at times. And then Tom Allen had a brief window of success, ironically, with an offensive coordinator named Kalen DeBoer and a defensive coordinator named Kane Womack and a strength coach named David Ballou. And they're all at the University of Alabama now. So it's interesting, all the ties between the two programs. And we know Signetti was at Alabama in 07 and 08 before he started his journey as a head coach. And they're a team that's as solid as a rock. I mean, they don't beat themselves. They have 8 turnovers all year, rock solid on defense, and you're going to have to beat Indiana. And Alabama is going to have to play their best game of the year. I think they're capable of doing that, and I'm hoping that Alabama's schedule and the gauntlet they've had to run is going to help them. Indiana, when they've played the better teams on their schedule, the games have been very close and tight. They have blown out some good teams like Illinois, but Alabama's a lot better than Illinois.
Yeah.
And I think this is going to be a great test. I think it's going to be another 4-quarter battle. And, to me, it comes down to, once again, the same 3 things that I said when I came on with you against OU. You got to win the kicking game or at least stay even. And Alabama unbelievably won the kicking game against Oklahoma. Nobody would have thought that.
Surprising, yeah, for how good Oklahoma's been in that and how Bama's been up and down.
Yeah, and I'm texting people during the game and after, guys, do you know who the best kicker was in the first round of the playoff? It was Connor Talty, who I wanted to deport. I mean, that's just how college football is. I mean,
oh yeah, because Miami was so terrible. Yeah, there was a lot of.
Yeah,
them.
I mean, the wind was horrible, but I give Talty credit. I criticized him, and since he missed the kick against Eastern Illinois, he hasn't missed any, and he was rock solid. The great Tate Sandell, he missed 2 kicks, and they were, one was difficult. It was a 50-yarder, and then the wind got the 36-yarder. But that just goes to show you, sometimes it's not your day, and it wasn't his. And Alabama showed a lot of resiliency to go on a 34-7 run in that game after falling behind 17-0, and showed a lot of toughness. And I think it shows that they believe in their coach because they fought for him. And look, I know there's all this speculation, TJ, but I never believed Coach DeBoer was going to Penn State. I never believed he was going to Michigan. I just think that they've got great alignment with President Moeller now over from Ohio State, and they taking over for Stuart Bell, who retired, and then Greg Burns done a great job as AD, giving the coaches what they need, and he's going to give DeBoer what he needs. Certainly, Penn State and Michigan are great opportunities, and Michigan's going through a rough patch, but Alabama's gone through those kind of patches, USC. But if you're a blue blood program, you'll bounce back. And I actually think Penn State, when they had to circle back and get Matt Campbell, was a great move. And I think Kyle Whittingham, I know he's 66, but his style of coaching fits Michigan. And I think it was a good hire. And I think Kalen DeBoer is doing a great job at Alabama. I said this on your show, and I'm going to say it again. Everything to this point forward now is gravy, but you can seize opportunity. And now Alabama has an opportunity against a great football team and a great venue to go and push on to the Final Four. And I think they have a really good shot. I think they're getting healthier. I think they're as healthy as they've been in a long time. And the biggest pleasant surprise for me is LT Overton. He's going to play in this game. I don't know how many snaps. I don't know how effective he'll be, but it's certainly big to have a stalwart defensive lineman that's given you 2 really good years. And I think health situation aside, if he's good to go and he can be, and that situation is in the rearview mirror, he's an NFL player, and you always welcome those guys back. And in his absence, Keon Keeley has stepped up big, so I think Alabama's got some more depth now. It's kind of helped them, and they're going to need it against Indiana because Indiana's really solid on both lines of scrimmage.
What are your thoughts on the teams that are the top 4 seeds haven't played in like 24, 25, 26 days by the time they kick off. And I know that Bama and Miami had pretty emotional wins. Bama's big comeback, Miami's being last second, so different. Both of them on the road. And both of them, as you know, Bama was pretty close, but that game kind of flip-flopped back and forth. Slight underdogs for both. I think at kickoff, Oklahoma was maybe a point favorite. But anyway, going up against challenging circumstances, having to play a tough game, but then also they've gotten a little bit more rest than you normally would, right? You usually have 7 days between games. Now you'll have 10 or 11. But that rest versus rust factor is really interesting to me. Less so from the Bama side, because I do think they are getting more healthy, which is a big benefit. But man, it feels like the teams that have that long of a layoff, we saw last year, we saw them kind of start slow. Now, there were other factors there. Boise State was not the same team as Penn State. Arizona State, not as much talent as Texas. Georgia didn't have a quarterback in that game that they had run with all year. I know it's the same guy that's ironically starting in the Sugar Bowl again this year. But and then Oregon ran into the buzzsaw that was. But Oregon started slow. Georgia started a little slow. Like that was pretty common. And I just wonder if Bama playing just a little over a week ago gives them a bit of an advantage against a team that's been sitting around for almost a month.
Well, it's going to be interesting because I'm glad you brought that up, TJ, because we all saw what happened a year ago. All the teams that got buys didn't win. And so it's going to be fascinating to find out if that trend continues. Certainly, I think there are advantages to staying in a rhythm and playing. And there is a rush factor when you, especially if you're already healthy. But then we all know the D-line injury. I believe the Daly kid got hurt in the celebration, which is very unfortunate. I hate that for that kid. But they've still got, 3 of their top 4 rushers back, and it'll give an opportunity to another player. And I thought, too, studying their roster, and I'll be the first to tell you, I've seen some Indiana, football this year, but not nearly as much as Alabama. And just studying their roster, I had forgotten that their number 4 receiver, E.J. Williams, is from Phoenix City. He's a guy that Alabama recruited cursorily. I mean, they didn't pursue him heavily, and he ended up going, to Clemson, starting his career there, and then transferring to Indiana. He's a good player, but I'll just say this: a lot of these guys, and it's a tribute to Kirk Cignetti and his ability to evaluate and develop. These are dudes that are, Yves Surratt, all these guys. They're good players, but they weren't blue chippers, but they're winners. And that's what Alabama's going to have to do. Indiana will not beat themselves. They're going to have to – Alabama's going to have to take it from them. And, to me, the 3 key areas – I've already talked about one, which is the kicking game. They can't have a disaster. You can't have a punt block.
Can't drop a punt in front of you. Yeah, I've never seen that in my entire life. Like,
I had people texting me about FanDuel accounts and and all this kind of stuff for the punter and everything.
I've watched a lot of football. I know you have too. I've never seen a punter drop it in front of him like that. But I've seen weird stuff fall off the side of the foot. But that was wild. I'll get right back to our interview. But Alabama fans, Indiana fans who might be watching this for the other perspective, make sure you are shopping with Alumni Hall. Probably a little bit late to go get stuff for the game unless you're going in person in Bloomington or Tuscaloosa. But make sure you're shopping at alumnihall.com. You can use our code CFA15 for 15% off either in-store or online. Make sure you get all your Rose Bowl stuff, anything from winning it, whichever side comes out on top, whether that's Bama, Indiana. Make sure you get your stuff for the semifinal. Make sure you get all your gear from Alumni Hall, who has the best and largest game day selection of anybody. CFA 15, again, will save you 15% online at alumnihall.com or in person. We appreciate it.
Well, like I said, if you'd have told me before the game, hey, Drew, Oklahoma's going to miss 2 field goals and drop a punt, I'd have been like, well, I guarantee Alabama's winning because Alabama beat themselves in the kicking game and really helped set up Oklahoma the first time around. We talked about that. Mm-hmm. This time Oklahoma had a meltdown, but Alabama has got to – they can't make mistakes. You made a great point. You can't drop a punt. You can't give up an explosive return, kickoff or punt return wise to Indiana, or you can't miss kicks. You've got to take full advantage in the kicking game. If you have a chance to block a punt, make a kick, make a play in the return game, you need to,
Yeah.
and to help flip the field because that's the kind of team they are. And then the other key for me is, of course, Alabama has to win the turnover battle. They won it 1-0 against Oklahoma, and the one was a touchdown. It was huge. It was a pick six near the end of the half. It completely flipped the game because Oklahoma dominated, scored the first 17. Alabama scored the next 17. And then going into the halftime, Alabama had all the momentum. Well, they've got to force, Indiana into some uncharacteristic mistakes. I don't think Indiana's going to beat themselves, but what I mean when I said Alabama has to take it from them, you have to blindside sack Mendoza. You got to force a turnover. You got to knock the ball free. You got to pick it off if he makes a mistake because he's thrown 5 interceptions in those games against high-level competition. So he has made mistakes. So you've got to force him into some mistakes. And then I think, much like they did against Oklahoma, and we talked about this, I said I thought Alabama needed 2 explosive plays of 40-plus yards. They did get 5 pass plays of 20-plus against Oklahoma. They're going to have to do some of that again. But I will say this, and it's like I keep throwing that card on the table. Eventually, Ryan Williams has to make a play. Okay,
Yeah.
he had 1 catch for 5 yards. I thought Oklahoma might be the one where he stepped up. He had another drop. He's got to make up some plays in the Rose Bowl because the way I look at it, Indiana's so well coached defensively. They're really good in the back end. I figure they're going to try to take Jerem away. And I got to give Cuevas a lot of credit. I think, once again, he'll probably be on a pitch count, but he made his snaps count. He had 3 catches for 35 yards in the game. He's a safety valve, a comfort guy for, Ty Simpson, and he'll have to do that again. But guys like Isaiah Horton, and then
He's amazing.
Lottier
Yeah.
Brooks had his breakout. Lottie
Yeah.
made plays when he had to, but all those guys are going to have to make some plays at some point in time in the game. And it comes down to this for me. Ty Simpson has to outplay Mendoza if Alabama's going to win this game.
Yeah.
And I said in the Oklahoma game it was a money game for Ty, and I thought he made a lot of money, and he can make a lot more money in this game if he beats Mendoza. Mendoza seems to be the favorite for the number 1 pick. Ty Simpson can make himself a high first round pick and make the decision very easy about what he needs to do next year if he plays well in this game. I'm not trying to put pressure on him; it's just a fact.
Yeah.
His numbers are better than Mendoza's. Now, Mendoza won the Heisman because of what his team accomplished. We all understand that. But I think Ty Simpson is as good as Mendoza. I think he can prove it on Thursday, and he's going to have to. They're going to have to protect him. And I was asked on another show today, what position group must have their best game of the year for Alabama to win this game? And it's the offensive line. Because when I was watching the Big Ten championship game, I was just really impressed with the front of Indiana. They sacked, saying I think 5 or 6 times. They were wrecking guys up front. Alabama's going to have to do a good job of protecting Ty and give him time. If they do, I think he can make some plays. But I think what Alabama's got to do is give themselves a chance in the fourth quarter. They've got to, and I thought they did a good job of coming out in the second half and putting game pressure on Oklahoma, building a 10-point lead. Oklahoma countered. But then when Alabama scored in the middle of the fourth quarter on that Daniel Hill run, I felt like that really put the pressure on OU to have to score. And I thought they kind of crumbled a little bit. And Alabama's going to have to put that kind of pressure on Indiana. Penn State did, and Indiana, to their credit, made the plays. But Alabama's going to have to do that to them again, put them in that position, in that bind, and then Alabama's defense is going to have to come up with their best game of the year. I just think
Yeah.
I picked Alabama 21-17 because I think Alabama's best game has not been played yet. I think the closest we saw was Georgia, but if you go back and watch the second half, they didn't score. So I think they need to – and then they put together 3 really good quarters or 2.5 against Oklahoma. This time, if they can play a clean 4 quarters, minimal penalties, no turnovers, and take advantage of opportunities, it's going to be a tight game regardless. But I think Alabama can win the game if they can get it to the fourth quarter and then put the ball in 15's hands, and I think he can win it if they can give themselves a chance by playing, good complementary football. And again, I know I said it last week too. I don't expect them to run it great, but I think Kevin Riley is going to be back. He's practicing. He can give them a little change of pace. If they can get 100 to 110 yards on Indiana and complement that with the passing game that they had against OU and that kind of success, then I think they can win a close game. But regardless, it's going to be a tough one. And but I think Alabama's got the grit, and I think Alabama's schedule up to this point can work to their advantage.
Yeah, I think something that'd be really important. We talked about this is not only maybe winning the turnover battle, but the way that Alabama was able to capitalize on the mistakes was really big. That dropped punt, they went down and scored. The pick six, obviously, they scored on that. So when Oklahoma made mistakes, Bama did a good job capitalizing. And you're right. They have been a little more, Mendoza's been a little bit more loose with the ball when they've played better competition. And I'd put Bama up against just about anybody else they played. Maybe you'd say they're pretty similar with Oregon, like maybe, I'd probably pick Bama in a neutral site head to head at this point, but the spread there wouldn't be more than 5 either way, I wouldn't think. So I think Bama is some of the better competition they've played, and he's been loose with the ball, but you do have to capitalize. The one thing, and not to take it back to an earlier point, they may not turn the ball over, but if if Indiana starts slow because of this layoff, then I think Bama has to capitalize there. They can't shoot themselves in the foot and be down 17-0 like they were against. I don't see them pulling off 2 straight 17-point comebacks. They got down early against UGA, and the game wasn't over at halftime, but just the way that Bama was moving the ball, not at all. It felt over right at halftime. And so they have to start a little faster, especially if you get the benefit of Indiana looking a little rusty for being off for a month. And so I think every game, there are opportunities for each team. Whatever the opportunity is that's presented, Mendoza being a little bit loose with the ball, maybe a little bit of an advantage in the trenches on the defensive line. Whatever the advantage is, a slow start, whatever, Bama has to take advantage of that. And if they do that, I think this game goes into the fourth quarter. I think Indiana's Indiana's played a little bit better this year. I wonder what that looks like against the 4- and 5-star athletes that Bama has if Bama found something there in the second half. I think Bama's the more talented team. Indiana's probably the better team. And when that happens, you line it up and you see what happens. That's kind of how it all plays out. And I think we're in for a classic. I don't know if you've been to the Rose Bowl. I've been to the Rose Bowl once, saw us beat Auburn. The Bama fans will enjoy hearing that in 2014. It'll be a special day for a lot of people, and hopefully the folks going out to it enjoy it, man, because I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and if they can pull off a win, as you know, Texas Tech, Oregon winner, and it's in your backyard in a way in Atlanta, what is the de facto Peach Bowl, and I think Alabama fans would take that stadium over. But,
I think Bama would be a slight favorite in that game, just to let you know. I think Vegas would make them a very unless Oregon blows Texas Tech out and just looks like Ohio State last year. I think Bama would be a slight favorite in that game.
Yeah, and it would be fascinating because if it was Oregon, we all know DeBoer's had a lot of success against Dan Lanning, and we would be reminded about that. So certainly, and then if it was Texas Tech, NILU. I mean, and I don't mean that in this disrespect, but they've thrown even more so than Indiana with their billionaire, the NIL booster. They've been able to build a great team over there, and but they haven't been to this level. I'm hoping Alabama's experience and their big game, pedigree will come in handy this game. We'll see. Certainly, I do think Indiana's better than a year ago. I didn't think they were ready for the biggest stage. I think they believe they are now, but I think Alabama's just got to go out and take it, and they've got to use it as fuel that everybody, once again, is picking Indiana. Nobody's picking Alabama. There's still people saying Alabama doesn't deserve to be in the playoff, which is absurd. But, I mean, that's just people that don't understand the game. But I just think Alabama, they've got to play clean, complementary football, which they did after the first quarter. But I completely agree with you. If they get into a situation, and again, OU is really good defensively, but if they get into a hole against this Indiana team with their offense, because I think Indiana's offense is better than OU's. They got a much better running game. They're very, very physical. That's the thing that stood out to me when I watched them against Oregon, because honestly, I didn't think they would win at Oregon. But they didn't just win. I thought they bullied Oregon. And so Alabama needs to, come out and establish that they're not going to be pushed around on the line of scrimmage, and they need to come out and they need to get the lead, and they need to let Indiana feel some anxiety and some game pressure, especially in the second half, because I felt like that's what happened with Oklahoma, and they felt the game pressure. And then we talked about it. Mateer, he was fortunate. He escaped the big mistake in Tuscaloosa. He did not escape it in Norman, and they have to force Mendoza into a couple of those mistakes. He hasn't made many, TJ, but if they have a chance, just like when Xavier Brown, who's I've started to call him Antonio Langham's nephew because he just seems to have this, this knack of making big plays in big games. If you get your hands on the ball, you got to make a big play. And that's what you have to, because this Indiana team doesn't make a lot of mistakes, but when they do, you have to capitalize. And if Alabama can win the win the kicking game, win the turnover battle, and then make a couple of big plays offensively, I think they can win a tight one. But regardless, I think, like you said, it's going to be a classic in Pasadena.
Drew, where can people follow you? Where can they find all of the content that you'll put out, the radio show, everything else before this game and then after this game too?
Well, I'm still fighting. The Iranians have a Twitter account, So, and by the way, I'm in an exclusive club. They got Chris Lowe's too. Unbelievable. So the great Chris Lowe, who I know well and is one of the great writers and media members in this business. But they can still follow me at 977 ESPN. They can follow our show, 97.7 The Zone, WZZN TV on YouTube. And then we have our SoundCloud page, 97.7 The Zone, and also 977ESPN.com. We're going to have our Rose Bowl preview tomorrow. We've been on a break since our Turkey Fry Moron of the Year show, which we have each and every year on the 23rd before Christmas. And we let the listeners vote. Our Moron of the Year this year was one of our listeners, which that's a first, but, one of our callers. I always joke his name's AC, and he's from Bangladesh, and I think maybe one of his cousins stole my Twitter account. Still, again, that they can follow me at 977 ESPN. They can follow us on SoundCloud, follow us on 977ESPN.com, and we always enjoy, connecting with you guys on the college football addiction. And we hope everyone had a Merry Christmas. And I want to wish everyone a Happy New Year, because we hopefully will be talking with you next week and talking about maybe a potential trip to Atlanta. But again, it's been a great run for Kalen DeBoer. I think they're going to make some moves in the portal. They've already made one with Joshua Ford, the tight end from Oklahoma State, to replace Cuevas. So it's going to be interesting. They've got a really good recruiting class coming in, a lot of momentum, and hopefully they can keep it going on Thursday.
Awesome. Appreciate you, Drew. Happy New Year, bud.
Yes, sir. Happy New Year to you, TJ. Thank you.
As we like to remind you, all of our content this year brought to you by Sleeper. Make sure you're on the Sleeper app, playing the more or less game, making some money with our code CFA for a 100% match up to $100 over on the Sleeper app.